Hello and welcome to today's event presented in partnership with Gigamon. The title of today's topic is, do you really know what's running on your network? My name is David Davis from ActualTech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator on today's event. We've got a great event lined up for you today. Before we jump into it, we have a little bit of housekeeping here that we first need to cover. So first off, we want this to be a very educational event. So we encourage you to ask questions using the GoToWebinar control panel there. We will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event where we will be covering all the best questions that have come in during the event. So please use that throughout the event as a question comes to mind. Just put it in the chat or put it in the questions box there, and we'll be covering those questions at the end. Also, we have a handout available for download there in the GoToWebinar control panel, and that is the ESG solutions brief on the Gigamon solution. So make sure you download that during the event because you can't get that after the event is over. So go ahead and just click and download that now for more information, and we'll be discussing that during the event as well. And then finally, we'll have a prize announcement for one lucky prize winner on today's event. We'll be giving away a $300 Amazon gift card, and we'll do that drawing after the Q&A. If you're watching this event on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. And I'm excited to introduce now today's presenter. That is Mr. Martin Crew, Director of Product Marketing at Gigamon. Martin, thank you for being on the event today.
You're welcome, David. Thank you very much for having us.
Excellent. Well, before we get started today, I have a little introduction here, a little level setting. First, I want to cover what you're going to learn. The goal of today's event is to help you learn about how to identify and visualize what's going on your network. I know that's a big challenge for a lot of IT professionals out there, just even gaining visibility into what's happening, what kind of traffic's out there, who's talking to who, and trying to prevent network bottlenecks and performance problems before they happen, and identify security issues as well. You'll also learn beyond just what's on your network, you'll learn what's actually happening. I mean, who's really communicating with who? What are these applications? Where's the internet traffic coming from? And with Martin's guidance here, we'll find out how we can use a network visibility fabric to help us accomplish that. And you'll learn about all this to help you deliver optimal network availability, performance, and user satisfaction. I mean, we need to keep our applications up and running all the time, make our users happy, and a optimally running network is one of the real keys to that. And then also get all your questions related to network visibility answered. Like I said, we'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end, so get those questions in. Now, before we jump into it and talk about network visibility fabrics, I want to first do a little bit of level setting here on the state of network visibility. I mean, there's no sense throwing up a bunch of bullets that say the network is critical to your company's infrastructure. If you're on this webinar, you're obviously interested in network visibility, you know how critical the network is, but you might not think about every day just how critical. I mean, according to a survey done recently by Cisco, the average compound annual growth rate of network traffic was 23% every single year. So every single year, the network traffic is growing by roughly 25%. So this is incredible growth that we're experiencing on our networks. And at the same time, according to a survey done by Juniper Research, there's a $1 trillion price tag associated with data breaches just this year alone. So we're being attacked from all directions. At the same time, the cost of downtime is rising. Companies are also moving data and applications to the public cloud, which you probably know is connected to your users and your clients and customers by, well, the network. So if you're investing in digital transformation or cloud solutions, you also need to be investing in network visibility. Now, at the same time, most of us in the world of IT are struggling to know what's happening on the network on a daily basis. And when an outage does occur, it takes much longer than it should to figure out why that outage occurred and where that outage occurred exactly, and what the source of it was on the network. So if this sounds familiar to you, you're not alone. Every company out there is facing network visibility challenges. So, I mean, what's the answer to that? Well, I've got a few recommendations here for you. First off, don't rely on traditional visibility solutions. Companies out there have aging packet analysis, network analysis tools that they bought long ago. Those just aren't going to cut it today. You need the modern solutions for network visibility, and that's what we're covering on today's event. You need to ensure that your company is secure and compliant. I mean, that's of critical importance. We don't want any resume generating events. When breaches happen, in many cases, unfortunately, a lot of companies, especially smaller companies, go out of business. And we need to ensure that we have maximum visibility. We need to really know what's happening on the network. And in my opinion, the answer to that is to implement a real network visibility fabric. And so if you're wondering exactly what is a network visibility fabric and what's involved in that, and how's it architected, and what would it cost, and what are the different pieces, you're in the right place. And I'm excited to now hand it over to Martin from Gigamon to help educate us on network visibility fabrics. So with that, let me hand it over to you, Martin.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate the introduction. And also, thanks to everyone who's in on the call today. Just let me get my screen up here. And for those of you that took a couple of seconds just to type into the chat box a nice hello or message, thank you. We really do appreciate that stuff. Okay, so my name is Martin Crew. I'm in the product marketing team here at Gigamon. And what we're going to do, as David said, is talk about network visibility. Everybody would like to think they've got good enough visibility to effectively run their business and fulfill their job functions. But the reality that we see time after time when we talk to customers is they either don't have the breadth of visibility or the depth of visibility that they really need. So what we're going to talk to you today is how a fabric like Gigamon's Network Visibility and Analytics Fabric gives you that capability. So the way we're going to do it is we're going to briefly talk about who is Gigamon so that you have a sense of who we are. Then we're going to talk about network complexity. This is one of the issues that no matter how many of these meetings or webinars we do, is always a big topic of conversation. In fact, immediately before this call, I was talking to one of our customers, and they said that before they had Gigamon, they had 23 separate devices on their networks, individual devices. They had some multiples of those, but 23 different tools from different vendors to be able to manage the network effectively. So when you've got that level of complexity, it's very natural to want to try and simplify. So we'll talk a bit about complexity, then we'll talk about what's on the network, how do you actually see what's on the network, and beyond seeing what's on the network, what is it actually doing? Then we'll talk about when you've got that in place, can you actually get to the sort of nirvana state of having high network availability, the great performance everyone expects these days, and therefore the user satisfaction that it's our jobs to deliver. After that, we'll go into a Q&A session, and as David said, please shoot questions to us as we go through. We will answer all your questions. If we can't do it during the webinar, we will get back to you after the webinar. And if you ask questions that are beyond my technical capability, then we'll get one of our technical marketing folks in contact with you. So that's the way we're going to go about the presentation today. I'm going to speak for probably about 25 to 30 minutes. And as part of that, I will be taking you in to have a look at the Gigamon Visibility Fabric and one of our tools, which we call Application Intelligence, which is one of the keys to showing you what applications are on the network and what they're doing. Okay, so before we get too deep, let's just give you a quick overview on Gigamon and what we do. So if people know Gigamon at all, they probably know us as being a networking company, and that definitely is where we came from. So half of our focus is on enabling our customer organizations to run fast. So what does that mean? Well, it means improving the application and network performance, ensuring you've got the flexibility so that regardless of the deployment model, whether it's all on-premise, whether it's a mix of on-premise, virtualization, which to us means private cloud, or using public clouds, or using any combination of those, you've got the same flexibility across them. And finally, optimizing network tools. As I mentioned earlier on, tools have got completely out of hand in many IT organizations. They have tens of these to do tasks that you can simply consolidate down and use Gigamon to replace a significant number of those. So the run fast is very, very important, but equally important these days is staying secure. Really, an organization should never have to choose between the ability to deliver the performance they need or the ability to stay secure. So over the last few years, one of the things that Gigamon has been building out are our security capabilities. So now, as you'll see a little later on, we really have a stack that goes all the way from level 2 visibility into the network traffic, all the way up through the applications and into the areas of threat detection and analysis. And that enables you to improve your security posture, both on-premise and across the cloud, which is obviously extremely important to most large-scale organizations these days, and accelerate that process of threat detection and response. So, as a little bit about what we do, talk very, very briefly about some of our credentials in the market. So we now have over 3,000 customers worldwide, and that includes 83% of the Fortune 100 companies, all 10 of the largest federal agencies in the US, 7 out of the top 10 regional banks, and global banks, that should be, and 8 out of the top 10 tech companies. So, you know, the cliche of you judge people by the company that they keep, you know, we're keeping some pretty good company there. So I think whatever size of organization you're representing as you listen to this, you'll find some very like-minded customers already using Gigamon. The technology is built on top of 75 global patents, so we have very deep, rich technology. And that technology obviously powers our product solutions. And as you can see in the last icon here, the product solutions and people's general customer experience with us is very, very positive. So we rate 4.8 out of 5 in our surveys of customer satisfaction. So that's as much as I really want to say about us. If there's any particular questions, we can take them later on. But having talked a little bit about that, what I want to do now is get some information from you. So David, I'm going to ask you to pop up the first poll question, please.
Excellent. I'll do that right now. So the question that I'm bringing up on the screen is a simple yes or no question, and that is, do you have visibility that you need about what's running on your network? And I'll leave this up here for about 15 seconds. It shouldn't take very long to answer a yes or no question, hopefully. And I see lots of votes already coming in, lots of responses. Thank you. Let's get just a few more. All right, looks like we got a lot of responses. Let me go ahead and share the results of this with you. And 56% said they have the visibility they need. 44% said they don't. What's your take, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, often at the outset of a presentation, that's what we need. The majority of people, or that's what we see, the majority of people think they've got that. But, you know, as we go through the presentation and we look a little bit deeper and particularly look at areas like applications and the ability to see the applications on the network, understand what they're doing, you know, maybe some people's opinion will change by the end of the session.
Excellent.
Let's hope so. Okay, all right. So David, thank you for that. Let me move on. All right, so as David said earlier on, there is no need for us to talk about why the network is so important to your organization, but I do want to pose a question, which is how did it all get so complex? So as we talk to our customers, there's one big thing that we see above everything else, and that's that most of the customers that we work with are in some process or in some stage of the process of digital transformation, or as it's called in government, IT modernization. This is a critical issue. This is really the determining factor as to how organizations are going to thrive and in some cases survive as they move forward. And the survival thing is a really big issue. So here's a quote from Accenture, that digital is the main reason over half of the Fortune 500 have disappeared since 2000. So you think about that, so that's 20 years, we've lost 250 multi-billion-dollar organizations. They've gone out of business. You know, we think about the impact that Amazon and folks have had on the retail sector, and we can easily visualize, you know, the empty shopping malls where Sears used to be. But also many of these organizations have been swallowed up by other much more nimble competition. Another thing that I saw the other day that was equally interesting is it's not just companies going away, it's that the rate of change is really there. So 50 years ago, a Fortune 500 company had a life expectancy of 75 years. Now Accenture is projecting that that's down to 15 years. So it's not just that this has happened once and now we're in some kind of stable situation. We're in a fundamentally unstable situation where things are going to continue to change for the foreseeable future. So when we talk about digitalization, what do we really mean? So there's a few bullets here, and I'm not going to talk to all of them, but I will talk to some of them. So the third bullet here, the expectation of real-time data access. So I'm sure most of you in the audience, you know, now know that when the user comes and says, hey, I need something, the implication is, hey, I need it now. And that obviously didn't used to be the case. I mean, years ago, someone would come and say, I need a report, I need a query, and it was okay for you to say that's going to be a few days, or if you're as old as I am, that's going to be a few weeks before you get that. But now, everyone expects everything now. Their consumer experience of instant access dictates their professional experience. So that's a really big issue in how things have got complex, because delivering that capability is a significant challenge for any organization. We've obviously got complete new types of data. I mean, 10 years ago, if you'd spoken to someone about Internet of Things or operational technologies, you really wouldn't have got any kind of, sort of knowledge from them back on what did that actually mean. But nowadays, whether you're a bank, whether you're a utility, whatever type of organization you are, you're probably heavily reliant on intelligent devices out there that are communicating in real time on the network. And of course, these expectations of real-time data access and all these different data types mean you have to adapt your application architectures. You know, the packages or custom systems that many of us would have grown up with just no longer work. They don't work in the challenging environment that we're in. So we've seen a rise of new application architectures. You know, many organizations adopting SaaS products, particularly in line of business units. And at the corporate level, many people changing their application architectures to use things like containerization and microservices to enable these applications to scale very rapidly across more than one platform. So we've seen this rise of new application architectures. What we really haven't seen is that a lot of the legacy apps are being sunsetted or retired. That has happened in some organizations, but for many of the organizations that we speak to, we often find that the core of many of their systems are still dependent on things like mainframe systems. And so getting visibility from everything from cloud services across to mainframes is extremely difficult. And of course, as these architectures get more and more complex, so what we call the attack surface significantly increases, and therefore the number of attacks and the sophistication of those attacks increases. So what we're seeing is the security issue becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and we see a convergence between networking and security groups. So when we think about Gigamon, as we'll tell you in the next few minutes, you've got to think about a fabric that weaves together not just networking capabilities, but networking and security capabilities to give you the visibility, not just across the entire network, but across all these different functions that let you work effectively together, both in networking and security. So at the center of all this is the user experience, and as we've said, this has got more and more complex with digitization. As it's got more complex, the connectivity gets more and more complex. You need more and more tools. So here we're highlighting some of the network performance and security tools that you might be using within an organization. And this type of complexity is something that we see all the time. That user I was just speaking with, they talked about having 23 different tools. They also talked about a physical problem they had, which was the cabling of all these things. They just could not keep track of the cabling that they needed to ensure that the network was robust. So the complexity is there, and with that complexity, as traffic grows, so risk grows. And very quickly, you get into a situation where you have neither the performance nor the security that you're trying to deliver. So how do you address that? So our view is that the way to address this complexity is to simplify the interfaces between all these things. And that's where Gigamon comes into its own. So the reason that we talk about Gigamon as a fabric is exactly that. It knits together all these separate elements within your network. So it doesn't matter whether you're a cloud, virtual, physical, or some mix of those. We give you the capability to bring all that information into a single place and get the visibility that you need. So some people say, well, is it hardware, is it software? And obviously the answer is it's a mix of the two. So we have a number of hardware devices that both collect information from all the different data sources on the network, and then we have our sort of core appliance products, which are intelligent. And into those we can draw processing boards that support many of the tools functions that right now people have separate boxes for. So many organizations, for example, will do things like deduplication. In fact, all organizations do things like deduplication these days, and they'll have a separate device for that. With Gigamon, there's no need. The deduplication application runs on the Gigamon hardware. Similarly with things like encryption, you know, most organizations these days are either completely running encrypted traffic or a significant amount of the traffic is encrypted. There are many different solutions to doing the decryption for that data. In our case, the model that we've gone for is having centralized decryption. So we decrypt data once, and then we provide that decrypted data to all the tools that need to consume it. So the idea is really no matter what functions you need, whether they're security or networking, the most efficient way to deliver a solution is to bring all that capability into our network, deploy it on our devices, and then we take care of distributing that to the right entities within the organization, whether those are tools, whether those are users or analytics. Okay, so that's a little bit about Gigamon and the network visibility and analytics fabric. At the end of this session, if people have specific questions, we can talk about those, or I can get you in contact with some of our specialists here who can answer any particular questions that you've got. But right now, I want to go a little bit deeper and start to look at how do you identify what's going on the network and what is it actually doing. So our view is that the only meaningful way to figure out what's going on in the network is to take a snapshot of that network at any point in time and be able to see exactly what traffic is flowing across the network. So our view very clearly is that the single source of truth for most organizations is the data on the network. Now, speaking of data, I'm going to hand control over to David for a minute just to ask you guys a question, which we ask in nearly all of our webinars because we're very, very interested on data growth. So over to you, David.
Thanks, Martin. I've just popped up the poll question that says, how much network traffic growth are you planning in 2020? And I know I mentioned a percentage at the start of the event. I don't want that to influence this poll, but I'm curious to see how the responses from today stack up with the survey that I've seen out there published on the internet. So let's see, how much network traffic growth are you planning for in 2020? And I'll share the results of this poll so you can see how you stack up with your peers on today's event. All right, lots of responses coming in. Thank you for those. Let me go ahead and share the results. All right, looks like 69% said they're planning for a 25% growth. That was the clear winner here. 22% are planning for a 50% growth. 4% are planning for a 100% growth. And there's 1% out there who said they're planning for more than a 100% growth in their network. Martin, how does this stack up with what you've seen?
Yeah, that's bang on. So we see that time and time again. So most organizations expecting 25% growth. And obviously, very few organizations have a 25% growth in their budget for next year. So one of the things that we see, and one of the challenges we're always responding to with our users, is the issue of, well, how do I do the same with either how do I do more with the same resources that I have for this year? So that's definitely a huge challenge. And I'll talk about a couple of the ways you can do that as we go through this presentation. What I want to do now is I want to go across. Okay, so now I'm in the Gigamon Fabric Manager. So I'm just going to log myself in, and then I'm actually going to show you a little bit of how we can help you tame some of these applications and do more with less as you move forward next year. So I'm not going to talk exhaustively about this logon process or what I'm going to go through, but I'm going through my high-level dashboard, going down to a specific device that I want, and then within that, I'm going to go into a suite of products called Application Intelligence. Okay, so everyone's used to the idea when you're managing the network that you're going to have visibility into the network traffic at the lower levels. You're going to see the packets, you're going to see the number of bytes and things that are flowing across. What we do at Gigamon is we go way beyond that. So yes, we have all that low-level capability, but we also take it up to the highest level, level 7 in the network, where we can see, as we can do here, what are the top 10 applications running on the network. So we can, quickly look around here, call out what they are. We also have options that will let me view those in different ways. I can see the total traffic, etc. But what we can do is go beyond that. So for most large-scale organizations that we deal with, it's not a matter of 10 applications they've got to manage. They can have hundreds of applications on the network. And many, many times they're hitting very specific problems with that. So for example, they're hitting problems like they're sending so much information to particular tools that they're hitting up against capacity limits on those tools. They need to find ways to filter out traffic and not send traffic to tools that are just clogging everything up. So that's one application that we see a lot of. Another is we see traffic being duplicated many, many times as it passes from one tool to the next. So what can you actually do to simplify that? So one of the things we can do is we can go into one of our capabilities, application filtering. Which is not cooperating. Okay, well, I'm not going to waste time on that. But essentially, we go into the application filtering, and here, where we see these check marks, we would just check off applications and say, right, for these particular tools, this traffic does not need to be routed to these tools. So this is a very, very significant thing for many of our users. I mentioned earlier on that many of our users are running hundreds of applications. We did some work with one of our users, which is a power generating utility, and we looked at their network traffic, and we found that almost half the network traffic was streaming video or other streaming services. So it was stuff that just did not need to be inspected by many of the tools. And by reducing that, they were able to take 130 applications off their network and massively reduce the amount of traffic that was going to some tools, like their threat analysis tools. So we can very easily do things like that. We can also identify applications that should not be on the network. So if you look here, we've got BitTorrent running on the network. That is a very common thing for us to find, that people will say, oh no, of course we don't have BitTorrent running on the network. But in fact they do, and as many of you will be aware, with products like that, the peer-to-peer products, the opportunity for exfiltrating data from the network outside of it is extremely high. So, interesting to be able, in a single snapshot, to be able to see what your top applications are, what the traffic is that they're generating, and then immediately be able to go in and filter those out. So that's a little bit about us. Okay. So that's an example of how we can use application intelligence to satisfy folks like this guy who's asking about application availability, performance, and satisfaction. Very difficult to do, but definitely something that we can do. So what I want to do now is share a couple of examples of some of our users who are using the Fabric to deliver on this capability. First is Under Armour. So most of us know Under Armour, but they're one of the great examples of a company that's been through a huge digital transformation. As you're aware, they started out as an apparel company, but these days, the vast majority of their revenue and the vast majority of their interaction with their customers comes not from the clothing side of the business, but the fact that so much of their products are actually digitally aware. So they now have more than 215 million people using their fitness applications. So their business has totally transformed, and the points of interaction they have with their customers have transformed from just being retail, but they've also deepened. So now Under Armour literally knows about their consumers' sleep patterns. If they volunteer the information, they know about their eating patterns. They know about their movement patterns, all of these things. So they have far more information on customers than ever before. And from that, they can look at the likely behavior of those customers. So when a fitness user, who's doing a lot of maybe running mileage a day comes to their store, they're going to say, hey, the most likely thing is this guy is going to be looking at running shoes or whatever. So they can transform all of that data to personalize the shopping experience for their users. So as they did that, they ended up with an extremely large amount of data that needed to be managed. It was very, very complex. But using the visibility fabric, they had the ability to look into that data and to figure out how to provide the data to the applications that they needed, so that when a customer came in, they already knew about that customer and they could pop up personalized choices that were very relevant for the individual. A similar story is one we have with Telefonica, who are a telco, a digital service provider, and a media group spread across the world. So in North America, Telefonica is not all that well known to us, but certainly throughout Europe and throughout the Latin America region, Telefonica is one of the major carriers. So in those markets, you have a group of extremely savvy users. Many people in those markets, they are of the generation where all they've ever known is the mobile phone, and it's the primary way that they interface with the applications that they want, that they communicate with their friends, their family, etc. So these guys are very large-scale users of bandwidth. So one of the things that Telefonica wanted as a product to differentiate itself in the market was the ability to dynamically monitor the bandwidth that people were using and be able to serve up the bandwidth that they needed to do the things they wanted to do. So using the Gigamon Visibility Fabric, that's something they've been able to do, to monitor by individual users the data usage, to look at the services they typically want that they're using on an increasing basis and make sure that they're provisioned to actually do that. So it's a very good example of a digital company where we're giving them the ability to respond in real time to the customer needs. The next customer I want to talk about, I don't have a fancy slide about, because this is a customer we were interacting with over the last few days, and I just put a few notes together. So this organization is a large electric generating authority within the US. They came to us, or they were an existing Gigamon customer, and they came to us with a very specific problem. They had a data threat analysis tool that was running on their network. And as with many of these tools, they've signed up for a specific amount of data they were going to be able to analyze. So in their case, it was 60 terabytes. They were hitting on that limit, and to go to the next data stage was going to cost them a significant six-figure sum investment. So they were discussing this with one of our consultants, and he said, well, have you actually thought about using our application intelligence capability? So this is the screen I showed you a few moments ago. So we installed the software on their network, and we were able to look at all the applications that were running there. And as I mentioned, we identified that 130 streaming applications had crept onto their network. And because they weren't filtering the traffic that was going to specific tools, basically all tools were looking at all traffic. So it was extremely inefficient. So we set the filtering on the network to prevent the streaming traffic from these services going to their security analysis tool. And as a result, we got some fairly dramatic stats back. So, as I said, we identified 130 apps they really didn't need to be looking at, but we reduced the traffic by 50% in 10 minutes. So if you remember that screen where I was showing you the check boxes, literally all you do when you identified apps that you don't want to send traffic to specific tools is check a box. So it's a very, very quick process to go through. And in their case, 10 minutes of work reduced the traffic on the network by 50% and got them a significant amount of additional capacity on the threat analysis tool. So we eliminated the need for the tool upgrade, and as a bonus, we actually identified BitTorrent was running on their network, which they'd sworn Black and Blue wasn't there, but it was. And then using another of our capabilities, we were able to identify not just that it was running, but we were able to actually identify the IP addresses it was running from and just kill it dead in its tracks. So it was a very, very significant return on 10 minutes of time to actually spend and do this. So significantly, the customer, after this experience, gave us a statement on the benefits they'd achieved. And I think very significantly, the last sentence here just bears reading out. So as an organization, we're stronger and more streamlined, better able to thwart attacks and prevent outages. So very significant return on investment. And as I mentioned a moment ago, I was speaking to a customer earlier on this morning, the one that had the 23 different tools that they were able to consolidate down to just use with Gigamon. One of the things that they told me, and I'm going to go to some notes, so there's some rustling of paper here, is, again, with their network threat analysis tool, they had a data limit that equated to 7 days worth of traffic. So they were only able to hold that and analyze it. We looked at the network and we realized that with all the different tools there was massive duplication of traffic that was occurring on the network. So we ran our deduplication capability for them on the network. And as a result of that, we took out so much data that their ability to retain traffic went from 7 days to 30 days. So 400% increase in the amount of data they were able to hold. So back to the survey earlier on. So for those of you who are facing, 25, 50% increase in data next year and probably don't have a commensurate increase in budget, one of the things to do is to think about how you use tools like Gigamon to simplify the network architecture to get that increased visibility, and by getting that visibility to say, hey, there's a bunch of traffic here that we're analyzing and we don't need to, or all this encrypted traffic, there has to be a better way to deal with it. And those are the type of things that we can identify, give you solutions to, and where those solutions translate into increased reliability, increased availability, reduction of the amount of storage for a lot of this stuff, and therefore enabling you to do more with the same amount of capability that you presently have. Okay, so that's the end of the remarks that I sort of prepared for this. So we talked a little bit about who's Gigamon, about why the network has got so complex. We looked very briefly at how you can see what's on the network and what it's doing, and how that using Gigamon can translate into optimal network availability, performance, and user satisfaction. So we've got a good amount of questions out there. We've got maybe 160 people dialing in, and a good number of people have sent questions through. So let's address those for the next few minutes. So where should we start? David, have you got anything that's top of mind for you?
Yeah, we do. We've got some great questions coming in. If you haven't gotten your question in and you're thinking about network visibility, now's the time to ask your network visibility question. So let's see. I'm not sure if you can help with this one, or if we need to, get back to this person after the event. But Angie says she's looking for something that monitors equipment as it's plugged into the network and can apply ACLs and allocate the device to a specific VLAN based on rules. Does Gigamon do something like this, or not?
Angela, I want to say that I'm going to refer that to one of my technical colleagues. I do not know, so make sure that we get that captured, David, and I'll get a response to Angela this afternoon.
Okay, excellent. Another question here, Jeffrey is asking, he says that Gigamon has a number of large clients that you talked about on the event. Are there any budget-friendly options for smaller companies?
Okay, so I'm going to be extremely honest with you and tell you that Gigamon's target customers are the very large-scale enterprises, whether they're commercial, whether they're government, or sort of semi-state in terms of power utilities and things. We do have products that scale, across the whole range of enterprises. So we do have many small customers that are using our products. But the majority of our customers are the larger organizations. But one thing I think you should always think about when we think about, well, what does it cost, is, well, what does it actually do? So as I said earlier on, if you've got the capability to use something like Gigamon and reduce the amount of traffic that's being unnecessarily processed on a network by a factor of 400%, then you are essentially buying a lot more capability for your existing tools than you presently have. So I think, although the reality is we're architecting for the larger scale organization, there are many smaller companies and organizations that can get good use out of Gigamon, especially where they're anticipating growth. Because with growth, there comes a lot of complexity and expense, and that's definitely an area that we can manage. Let me share something with you. One of the things that we do on a regular basis is work with some of the consulting firms. So one of the things that we worked with last year was Enterprise Strategy Group, who look at the business benefits that various solutions provide. So we asked them to speak to our users and really drill into, well, what are the quantifiable business outcomes that you've achieved as a result of investing in Gigamon? So here's a few. So in terms of networking security and performance, they've observed a reduction of 70% in the number of false positives that people are trying to chase down on the network. They've identified 50% reduction in network downtime. A lot of that comes from downtime while you need to upgrade tools and things like that. So if you can actually use our inline bypass capability, then you can take those tools out of the network, do the upgrade, and then bring them back on the network without losing any operational time. In terms of visibility and cost, putting a value on visibility is difficult, but people are saying that they're seeing a substantial increase in network visibility. And the reduction of cost really goes to things like I mentioned earlier on. So by being able to see exactly what apps are on the network, what's generating the traffic, you can then make decisions around, well, do I need to continue to do that? And modify policies. So, for example, you're not looking at or sending all your streaming data to tools that can't introspect it in the first place. So there's definitely benefits to be had on that. And then finally, in terms of agility and complexity, we all know our IT networks are going to get more complex. There's no way around it. With the move to the cloud, with the fact that no one or very few organizations are going to be truly 100% cloud-based, hybrid networks, multi-cloud networks, networks that accommodate IoT and operational technologies are only going to get more complex. So the ability to have that visibility is extremely important. And it is one of the things that customers do report very consistently, that they're getting more agility as a result of that visibility, and that because they can get rid of a lot of the tools by consolidating them on the Gigamon platform and our software capabilities, their infrastructure is getting less complex. And we are going to have this report, I believe, David, is that right?
We do, that's right. Yeah, we have the ESG report that you're talking about right there available as a handout. So I'd recommend to the audience to download it now because, after the event ends, you won't be able to gain access to it. So click it now and read it after the event because there's some very important statistics in there, especially around the economics of implementing a network visibility fabric at your IT organization.
Okay.
So,
yep.
Yeah, let's see. So another question that came in here, they're asking about, while we're talking about economics, we might as well cover this. What does this type of capability cost?
Well, I think as I've sort of mentioned earlier on, cost is always relative to the benefits that you get. But, to answer the direct question, average deal size for us with a new customer is probably somewhere in the low six figures. So that's the level of initial investment that you'd be looking at.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned a company there that had some 23 different networking tools. I mean, if you're able to perhaps, eliminate some of those and the maintenance and the complexity around those and what the staff, I can only imagine, has to go through to use those tools and keep them running on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. I mean, if you think about the training that's required for those and maintaining staff that really know how to use them, the ability to consolidate that down to a single fabric like the Gigamon fabric is substantial. The other thing to think about is in terms of network availability and reliability. If you've got 23 different tools running on your network, that's 23 potential points of failure. So if you can take those 23 tools down to using Gigamon and say 4 or 5 specialty tools, you've reduced the amount of exposure you've got to failure from those by a very significant percentage. So there's always upside to consolidating things onto a single platform where it's possible, particularly where you have a platform that's as capable as ours. One of the things that I've noticed from the questions, David, I want to specifically pick up on is this question of, well, what is it? So Gigamon is a mix of hardware and software. We have a number of hardware appliances. One is a specialist range of appliances that captures data and does some basic things on the manipulation of that traffic, normalizing it and sending it forward. Another is a range of products called the HC range, and that's where we bring in sort of our real intelligence. So these appliances sit in the center of the network, and they support functions like our application visibility. They support things like deduplication. They support things like encryption. So the concept here is that rather than having all these specialist devices out there, you adopt the Gigamon product family, and that one family will address a lot of these tools. So at one level, they are appliance-based, but at another, they're software, obviously, and that software can be deployed across a number of different platforms. So we can work on virtual environments. So whether you've got, Nutanix, whatever, VMware, we can deploy on those, and we can also deploy in the cloud. So if companies have traffic that only exists in the cloud, we have taps that will enable us to tap into that traffic and bring that back to one of our appliances so that you have full visibility onto that cloud traffic, which is something people are often very concerned about. There's the notion that, well, if I move this to the cloud, am I going to lose visibility? All with the assumption that the cloud providers themselves have tools that will provide the level of visibility that enterprises need, which in many cases they do, in some cases they don't. So even if they do, you don't want to be using multiple tools to get visibility on your network traffic. This is one of the things where you really do want a tool that can span everything, and that's something that we can do. So regardless of the environment, yes, we have a solution that will monitor the traffic, aggregate it, and then let us manipulate it using these higher-level application intelligence, dedupe-type functions we've discussed.
Excellent. Yeah, it's good to know that you have a solution, because I know, more and more companies are moving applications and data to the cloud, and also companies are looking at multi-cloud. I'm curious, there's another question here. Which clouds do you all support?
Yeah, so again, there is no one cloud solution that fits all companies, all organizations. So we support all of the major clouds. Statistically, what we see is that the majority of our customers are multi-cloud, that they may have Amazon as the core, but many of them will have Azure or something on a departmental basis. And we're also seeing an increasing number of people starting to use the Google Compute Cloud capability. So we run on a multi-cloud basis. We have a product called AnyCloud that will enable us to do that. So if people are either now in a multi-cloud environment or moving into one, then the capabilities that we've discussed are available to you.
Okay, excellent. And then I know you talked about the hardware versus software, the architecture. We covered that one. Another question here, James is asking, what if you have multiple sites or offices with different subnets? Can we gain visibility into that? And he also has new acquisitions coming that I'm sure will just, aggravate that problem.
Yeah, so this is a very typical environment for us to operate in. As I mentioned, when we're talking about digital transformation, we see among our customers a lot of acquisition activity, a lot of divesting of some assets and acquiring of others. And as you acquire new assets, or new companies in this case, then you're acquiring new infrastructures that need to be consolidated as quickly as possible. So that definitely is one of the use cases where we play extremely well. As is another that's alluded to in James's question, which is multiple sites and offices. Many times you'll have things like banks, where, as I mentioned, we've got 7 out of the top 10 global banks using us, where they'll have a very complex physical structures. They'll have branches, they'll have regional offices, they'll have head offices, they'll have data centers spread across those in some way, and they need solutions that give them visibility all the way from an ATM on a wall in a branch in XYZ through to a complete consolidated view of the organization. So we do have solutions that will handle the multiple sites, multiple physical offices, and also complex subnets extremely well.
Excellent. And I know you mentioned virtualization and public clouds. There's another question here about, what about private clouds and containers? Can they monitor network traffic there as well?
Yes. So this is a big change that we've seen over the last couple of years, that as organizations move to scale out a lot of their applications, they're doing it in virtualized or private cloud environments with products like Nutanix and VMware. We support those, and we also support containerization. So for organizations where they need to massively scale, containerization and microservice architectures are things that we find many of them are looking at. And many of them are very concerned that as they move to that type of architecture, are they going to lose visibility? So with us, no, we've got you covered on that. We can definitely make sure that you've got the visibility into all those modern architectures.
Excellent, excellent. And I know you kind of covered the architecture a little bit, but Adele is asking, how does this actually work? How do I insert this into my network to gain this kind of visibility? Can you go into a little bit more detail?
Sure, I can. And thanks everyone for staying tuned. We're nearly at the top of the hour, but let me just address that. So typically Gigamon sits behind the firewall. So you'll have a firewall obviously protecting the perimeter of the network. And then typically Gigamon sort of sits immediately after that. It's not the only deployment architecture, but it's one of the most complex. So we pick up the traffic when it's come in, and then we decide, or the rules engine within Gigamon decides what to do with that traffic. Is it encrypted traffic that needs to be sent for decryption before it can be sent on within the organization? Is it traffic that we want to filter out? I gave the example of people, watching shows using streaming apps or listening to sports on streaming services, whatever. Do you need to decide just to either kill that traffic and not permit it at all, or prevent it from being looked at by other tools? So that's usually where we sit within the network architecture. I'm not sure if that wholly answers the question there, but typically that's where we deploy immediately behind the firewall.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, it's good to kind of get a visual of exactly where the Gigamon solution would go in the IT infrastructure. So that's very helpful for me. And Adele and Dan commented as well that was his question too. So good to answer that multiple people's question with one answer. So I know we're nearing the top of the hour. I do want to award today's $300 Amazon gift card to James Whistler of Texas. Congratulations, James Whistler of Texas. We'll reach out to you to deliver that prize. And before we go, I want to ask you, Martin, if there's any recommendations you have for people out there who want to learn more. Should they just go to gigamon.com?
That is always the best place to find us, yes. Just to say, we are a global organization, so wherever you're listening out there, we're going to have a regional office by you. We also do a lot of work with partners, so if we don't have our own local office, then we're going to have a local partner near you who will understand your local market conditions and be able to come up with the best solution that's available in your market area. So that is where I would always direct people. We will make the slides available, and we will also make the ESG report available. But if anyone is more interested than that and wants to get in touch to do a demo or anything like that, then you can just reach out directly to me. I am Martin, MARTYN, .crew@gigamon.com. So let me know, and if there's anything specific I can do to help, I'll get you routed to the right person, and we'll take care of things.
Awesome. Well, it's been a really great event. I learned a lot. I know the audience did as well. I really appreciate Gigamon supporting today's event. Thank you, Martin, for the great presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And thank you out there to everyone in the audience who joined us on the event today. Well, we appreciate your support and hope you have a great day. For more information, visit gigamon.com. See you next time.